So we wanted to talk a little bit about guest, sort of setting up your guests better and really having some good guest strategies, because I think that's, that's where some of the highest value you're going to find you get over the long term is getting that sort of guest relationship building and networking going for you. And you guys, especially the two that are on right now, you guys have good guests come on your show. So you want to make the most out of that. And we have a couple of, podcasters have been doing a long time, and for them it is absolutely the way they make the most money in their business, and so, or the way they get the best speaking engagements, or the best networking goes on. And we've used it that way as well. So we've used it to elevate our expertise, but I also use it to get speaking engagements and get clients all the time, so it translates for us. And so we want to make sure that we're doing a really good job as hosts of making the most out of the guest strategy that you've got going on there. And so there's some things that Tom and I have been doing for a long time, and some other hosts that we've emulated, and some that are on our platform do really well. And we want to copy those best practices. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Plus there's a couple little side notes from our team that they wanted us to mention for you. Did you have anything, Tom?
Something may come up as we go, but no, I mean, this is what I was expecting to talk about.
Okay, good.
I was expecting to see Tom doing a podcast that's from sliding down Breckenridge. That's what I thought based on yesterday's video.
That would have been a lot of fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. No, not on the mountain. Not enough bandwidth up there.
Yeah.
They'll be sledding though next. There's all sorts of pictures of the girls having fun there. Of course, I'm back where it's short sleeves, sunny Southern California weather here. It's actually a little hot today.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, listen, you're not getting any sympathy from me.
Sure.
Oh, I heard in the Northeast it's horrible.
You're getting hammered over there. I know.
-2 degrees. I just went to visit my daughter in Boston, and she said, "Oh, let's walk over to my favorite Chinese restaurant." And it was like 4 blocks away, which you'd think normally no big deal. And by the time we got there, we needed to pour tea down our shorts. I mean, it was so cold.
That gives a whole different meaning of hot pants, huh?
Exactly.
There you go.
I like it.
Well, let's get started on the guesting. And so a couple of things is, first off, you've done hopefully done a very good job of following the sort of protocols of inviting people, making sure that you have your calendar set up. I got invited on a podcast and did it this week. I did it more so because I was hoping I could coach the guy to do a better job on it, but he had no calendar, no information. I sent him my bio in an email. He didn't even recognize that he had it when he's talking to me in the beginning. So it was just like not done well there. So make sure you've got those practices. And I think we did a video on that on our client call like 2 ago or something. So you can check that out in the FAQ anytime. But, making sure that's in place, that does a lot of giving you the prep work you need.
Well, I know certainly Mitch has a very good, solicitation for if you want to be a guest, has a whole form. I don't know what you're using, Scott, but having you're not using anything. All right.
Watch the video.
Watch the video, or there's some really good practices for using schedule once as an option. That's what we use, where people book on your calendar, but they book on your calendar and they have to fill out all the information that you want to get from them in order to book that appointment.
Yeah, and so Calendly's free. So if we use schedule once because we are coordinating 2 of our schedules, so we both have to be available for the call. So for the interview, so that's a little more complicated. That's why we do it that way. But if you don't have as complicated a situation, you can use Calendly. It's very simple. And you can still do a form. And so all you got to do is, make sure you give them follow-up emails as well, which we do. So if you I will drop in here when I get a chance, when Tom's talking, I'll drop in here the link where you can pretend to register for one of our podcasts and you can check it out. But Alexandra also has up in the FAQ area templates of what we use. So you can read them.
That's the help resources section of
yeah.
the customer dashboard, just to be clear.
So you can see our follow-up email. And in our follow-up email, we tell them, make sure you check your equipment, make sure you have headphones that don't have a microphone on them. And so we give them some advice. And for a lot of newbies at it, this happens a lot. You get the newbie guests who've never been a guest on a podcast before, and they get nervous and they don't know what they're going to do. And then they send your assistant or you all those kinds of emails in the meantime. Drives me crazy. And so we have this. So this cuts down on tons of those emails. So that helps tremendously. And again, setting out expectations. So we have that, and we send that one repeatedly in case they didn't repeat it. They receive it within minutes of scheduling, and then they receive it like, I think it's 48 hours ahead of time, and then they receive it another 30 minutes ahead of time. So we do that. So they've got it multiple times in case it's, not on their phone and they happen to be in a different place. So those are just setting that up, sort of sets the tone. This is professional. I've got this handled. I've got this under control, and we're going to do a really good job. But it also gives you all the information you need to do a little bit of homework before you start if you don't know them. So while we like to get to know our guests on the fly, we also do need to know that we at least looked into them, right? We checked out their website, right? Why'd you invite them on the show? There should be a reason why. And that's what we always start with. We have a reason why we've invited them. Now, it might change over the course of the interview, and that's perfectly fine. It happens to us all the time, like just completely pivots in a different direction. But we go in there with this mindset that, hey, we've got this information going and we know this basic amount of him. So we had an interview with Jay Abraham, which was such a trip. And I had prepared a little bit more because he's important. And he's got tons of information out there to use. So he's not a new guy in the industry, right? So you've got all this information. And so what we did was I wrote a few notes there. I didn't write guiding questions, but I wrote a few notes about the kind of direction I wanted to go in there. And so in that, I made a couple of notes to myself so I didn't forget the name of his books. Sometimes there's just like a classic line that they repeat. And it sounds better if you say that as the host rather than them saying it about themselves. So this is one of those things where I make a couple notes of what I would like to say. So if someone were to interview me, what do I want them to say about me? It's great that they say, oh, this is the coolest person and I have the most fun meeting them. But it really doesn't tell them why you're relevant to your show or why it's relevant to the topic at hand. And so you just want to have a little bit of tie-in that is what I would call a soundbite introduction, right? So when I wrote an article about John Livesey, I called him the pitch whisperer. It stuck. It's now on the cover of his book. He uses it all the time. It's in his intro everywhere. But I coined that because that's what he is. He's the guy you want to take into your pitch with you. And when I said that, that was just, it made it really concise as to why I was writing an article about him. Same thing when you're doing an interview and a podcast. And so really think that out ahead of time. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yes.
One of the things that I do is I never accept the guest's bio. The bio that guests provide is terrible and nobody would ever listen. Who wants to sit there and read a bio or listen to someone's bio? There's nothing more boring. So what I do is I craft an intro at every show, a completely custom intro that tells the story of, and it follows a pattern. I use the hero's journey story guide, and I tell a 3-sentence or 4-sentence story about their path from total failure to brilliant success and the hardships and what they've overcome to get there. And I would say half of the time, right after I even say the intro, the guest is saying, oh my God, I've never had an intro like that before. So
that's a great technique. So you're providing them a lot more. You're telling their beginning story in a great way. And, that's good, especially if you want to, because, podcasts are not very long. You want to get to the heart of the matter, right? And we don't necessarily, while they might be famous in our niche, they're probably not necessarily famous to our audience because our audience is learning about them. And so that's also an important thing, is just because they think they're famous or they're well known to you doesn't mean they're well known to everyone. And so sometimes having that sort of like jumping back and telling that story, Mitch, is a great plan to have. And then get you right into the real questions of what you want to ask them about how they're approaching things now and in the future. But what I also find is that when you do that, what Mitch is recommending and what I did with Jay Abraham, when you do that, they have such respect for you and you build a better relationship. It's like you went on I'm going to use Stephen Colbert or something, and he actually read your book. You know, it's like, that's like, he actually read your book. You can tell, right? When you have a few little notes and nuggets that you pull out from that, you know, even if they're just off the internet, trust me, you don't have to look that hard. They're just so flattered that you took the time to look into them, that it makes a big relationship difference. And that's what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build a better guest host relationship. And in a way, when you've done your homework like that, you're actually elevating yourself as a host, as a good host. And that really puts you at the same level or even above your interview subject, which is a really interesting dynamic to have going on, especially if you're in an industry where you're learning and you're new to it. So like when we went into 3D printing, you know, we had to do a bit of research on some of these companies we were interviewing, and we didn't know anything about, you know, CAD software that would do certain things. I mean, if it wasn't something we used every day, we didn't know about it. So we'd have to research that and learn about it, and just enough so that we could ask the important questions. But once we did, it was like, wow, we must be experts. We have a broader knowledge base. And so that's going to help your show as well in terms of helping elevate your authority. And so those are good things to have. The other really important reason, and I want, Tom, you to talk about how we do it on our show, is thinking about the setup of the show. Like, do you want to intro them separately? Do you want to intro while they're listening? Those are some of the things. So Mitch is doing it while they're listening. We actually do it separate. And
it's hard. You're right, because for instance, Scott is recording his show live, and you've got to do it all in one take. Now, while we do clean it up when we edit that as a podcast, and if there's any awkward pauses or anything that really you would rather weren't there, we're going to fix that. But you definitely have to be more on your game when you're doing it in one take live on Facebook like that. I do prefer to record the interview first and have it just be the interview with the guest. And then after we have the knowledge and experience of that interview, we go back and record an introduction. And then we also record our final thoughts, just Tracy and I having, and it's easier. It's different when you're co-hosts.
Yeah.
And most are not co-hosts. We actually have a new podcaster coming on that is another co-host situation. So that'll be interesting. But if it's just yourself, then it's your own final thoughts or conclusions, things you might want to say to your audience that either, you know, you'd rather not say while the guest is on the line. Not that they're not appropriate, but I mean, sometimes you wouldn't like to have that guest chiming in or commenting on it when you're having.
So you can mute them. That's another strategy.
Yeah. So that's, I, in terms of a podcast in and of itself, I do like to produce it in a little more predictable way than if you're just recording it as one live thing. But this is not a right or wrong thing. I actually think Scott's getting so much more out of his because he's doing it on Facebook. He's the Facebook Live. Everybody's seeing it. That's doing that is more beneficial to him than having a completely polished live show.
Yeah, I think the spontaneity that you're having, Scott, is actually helping you. So I don't think in a way that's hurting you, but you might want to then take the time to write that guest intro down for yourself so that you really have it in your head before you start.
Yeah, if I don't know him, it's one thing I really focus on. But we have seen this week alone, it'll be kind of a dead week everywhere else. Like our episode on Tuesday, 1,100 views already on Facebook. I know, it's crazy. And it was like the one this week I thought wouldn't hit, and it's 1,100 views. Everything's been at least 300 views, if not 500 or 700 for this week's episode. So it's been kind of crazy that way.
You know, it's holiday weeks can surprise you, and that's something is that what you don't realize is how desperate everyone is actually to get away from their family, even when they're with their family. So
Right.
they find a lot of downtime or time in traveling in airports and cars, and they do catch up on a lot of things. We find that our listening over holiday weekends usually spike. And then for some reason, for our particular show, when we did it on 3D printing, we usually had a Sunday spike very regularly. And so that must have been when people were, you know, catching up, and maybe they'd gotten out of their weekend, but they wanted to really do something for themselves at the end, and because ours was an educational show in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but back to this sort of guest idea is one of the other important things that you have to remember is that there are nuggets happening across the way of what you're doing, and that these are sound bites, right? And so when you're introducing somebody or when you're closing and thanking them, that's also an opportunity, like Tom was saying, where you're tying their why you brought them on the show in. That's a really good time to make that clear if it wasn't already. It was like, I thought this was going to be great because they have such insight into XYZ. And it was, and that was profound to me. Or, so when you also tie it into what you personally got out of it, it helps people sit back and reflect and think about what they got out of it as well. And so that's a really good way to tie those things together. But it's also a great way is either in that intro or in that outro to remember that you have an ego bait opportunity, right? It's going to become a graphic, or it's going to become a soundbite on Facebook, or it's going to become a quoted phrase. Now, our team will fix it up so that if you didn't say the guest's name, that's okay. They'll take a little liberty with the quote because it's not officially in quotes. So we're cheating the system slightly. It's graphically in quotes. So they'll fix the pronouns and different things like that to make it right. And they'll correct anything so it doesn't read funny. But you want to make sure that you clearly said that somewhere in a sentence, and then you would have like ... and then another portion of it where we can tie them together and really make them sound brilliant. And what we're really doing is it's not just saying, this is such a great person. That's not what the goal of ego bait shouldn't be. It should be that because they learned this or because they are this, then you can get that. And so if you're thinking about it as a cause and effect, this is a person of interest because why, thinking about those things when you're crafting that or as you're saying it, like, and it doesn't have to be as like profoundly cool, like calling them a pitch whisperer. Like, you don't have to coin things. It doesn't have to be that way, but it just has to really make that relevant to your audience. So like I was fixing one of your Scots, I think just today. Did you interview Adrian Ashley? No. Adrian Ashley. So I don't know if you guys know who Adrian Ashley is, but she's doing like the coolest sex app. I guess I don't know how to describe it otherwise. It's like it's going to give Tinder a run for its money, and so she called it crypto something sex. I don't know. Anyway, it was really kind of neat. But what she was tying in was this idea that of how to pivot in your life, and that this was her pivot out of a horrendous situation of divorce and other things. And so that ties into the show Pivot, right? So you have this like tie into it. How it went from that to sex is a wild ride. So maybe they're going to want to come along and hear that. So you can also entice them by how you say something. So that's another good way is like, how she goes from this to that, is a must listen. You can also say it that way. Or
we've seen, watch. I don't know if you two have experienced it at all, but we've seen quite a much higher social media engagement from guests to our hosts' podcasts in general since Ego Bait started going out. And we're getting much more shares. The hosts are getting much more shares on social media. And it's because of this, really getting at what Tracy's talking about is really getting at how are you going to incentivize the guest to want to push it out? How are you going to motivate them to want to push it out? There's got to be something about that guest that they want to share, something you're saying about them. And obviously Tracy's talking about more specifically how to craft that or different ways that you could consider, recording a soundbite that's going to serve that purpose. Like she said, we're going to go through and the whole episode and find the best one we can, regardless of whether you do that or not. But if you do have an opportunity to think about it, it can help make it that much better. And
especially when you're tying it into the relevance of your show. Right. So like, that's really, your show is about a topic, your show has a mission. And when you're tying it back to that, then you're actually making that connection between the two of you stronger. And so, because they, you can say, hey, this is the coolest guy ever, and that sounds great, but I don't know if I'd want to share that on my Facebook. Like, it's nice that somebody says that about me and I'm happy that they shared it about me, but I don't know if I would reshare it. But if somebody were saying that my experience helping podcasters do this has, changed my world, your world in this case, or has, increased my business tenfold. Like when you say something like that, that sounds like a testimonial. now I definitely want to share that, because that's not me saying it about myself. It's someone else saying it about me. So that helps.
And the great thing about that, we're seeing not only social shares increase, but then, we've had a couple hosts write into us and say, hey, is this what EgoBait is supposed to do? And they send us a screenshot of the host's, of the guest's website where they've put it on their media page. And that is a backlink back to their blog post on their site. So from just a site statistics perspective,
that's the number one point of it, actually.
It's serving them and it's serving you, and it's just making it easy for them to do it and motivating them to do it. So taking down some barriers. We always had a lot of trouble trying to get people to actually put something on their site or give us a link back to our site. This technique appears to be working, and we're going to continue evaluating that, but it really does seem to be working.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so the EgoBait graphic is well done, but it's not the right size, not the right shape. And here's what I mean. It's not suitable for a website that typically operates in horizontal images. And so if someone is creating a page, I have a page called Live Appearances, where I take the shows that I appeared on and I then post the show information on my page, one after the other. Vertical images don't work well at all. It messes up the page. Horizontal images work fantastic. Horizontal images work on other people's websites, that work on social media. Vertical images don't. Square images don't either. It's that horizontal image that is, and I'm trying to figure out why. I've had like 56 or 57 episodes at this point, and I don't think one person has ever taken the EgoBait and used it yet. That's hard to understand why. And I asked one person, this is not very scientific, I asked one person, and that was what they told me.
So I use a rectangle and a square, and with my ink column, because of that reason, because I actually reuse it in LinkedIn, and so I need it in the rectangle. And so I don't see why we can't talk to our team about making sure that you have a choice of which way you want it. But Square works well on Facebook and on Twitter, and that's why that format has come about from a social share standpoint. But you're right, the website, it's not a great format for a website. What we have done, and this is what I did on our site, and I've seen other people do, is they'll take the square and make it the featured image, and then they write the text, which links back to the articles, if you're doing like a press review kind of thing or a press page, but it doesn't work, you're right, in the other format where you're sort of doing the features.
Right.
So I don't see why not. And I made a note, and we can have the team look at giving you the option of both. So because the format's not that difficult.
It does. I don't think it would make a big difference to our workflow. It's just a matter of creating the template.
Can I ask a question? And this is not related to this topic. Thank you for that, by the way. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Here's my question. When you create the transcription, are you creating a literal transcription or a grammatical transcription?
Good question. Really good question. It starts it's a 3-step process with our team and how we do it. The first is a literal word-for-word transcription that the first person is doing. And we're trying to make it as accurate to what was actually said as possible. Then there is a next step of a proofreading step, which is a quality control check done by a completely different person who listens to the entire episode, reviewing that original transcript, making any corrections that were wrong, and then also starting to edit it, to format it to make it easier to read, to make sure that it reads we don't change a ton of it. The post ends up being 95%, probably 95 or so percent of what was actually said in the episode. And there are reasons for that have a lot to do with Google and how Google's algorithms evaluate posts and rank them and rate them.
Okay.
So we don't want to deviate and make it such a prose written piece as if you were taking that transcription and preparing it to be a book. That would be a very different editing process, but we clean it up, remove things that are redundant, irrelevant, And
Yeah, so
certainly
like,
do fix some grammar to a point.
Yeah. So sometimes we say things like, I'll go, oh, and this, no, wait. And then I correct myself. They will take that out so it doesn't get misread. It sounds fine when you say that, but really it's you meant the opposite. And so when you have that in the middle of it, so they'll take that out, that they'll correct that so that it does read properly. But that's the only stuff they touch. Double words happen all the time. That kind of
Let me tell you why I ask. What I do is I go through each show, and I have a plugin on my Chrome browser called Grammarly. And if you guys don't use Grammarly, you're missing out on. I mean, my writing has elevated several notches just with Grammarly alone. And when I go through our posts with Grammarly, there's typically between 20 and 30 errors in every post. And some of them are missing words. And those are words that I might have said or should have been said. Like if I said, I took a walk deck, left out the word on, Grammarly will catch it and say, do you want to add the word on? I took a walk on deck. And so what I do, and it might be wrong of what I'm doing, is I actually pop the word on in that spot. So I don't know if you guys want to do that or if you think that's wrong.
It's not a right or wrong. It's a good question. It's not necessarily right or wrong, because certainly if you're expecting people to read your post and you want them to have the best experience reading that post, I can understand you'd want the grammar to be correct. However, our main objective with these posts is to be two key things. I'm going to say what I consider to be the second priority first, okay? And that is that it's a supplement to your listeners.
Right.
So they go to the post to get links, to see images, things you talked about, if there are any related videos. People that listen to it all the time, it's home base. They know where to go. If they're driving and listening, oh, I want to go look at that again, or I want to go see that, or go get that link. But the more important thing is for Google. We're casting a wider net marketing your business on Google. And when you have the reality of some of those missing words, and it's typed more the way it was actually spoken, Google's algorithms can tell. They actually know, because of the word order, missing words and all that, they can tell that it came from human speech and it wasn't from thinking and typing.
Oh, good. Okay.
And they rank those posts higher since 2009. Google's been doing this.
Okay. So yeah, I just actually read
higher than ones that don't.
I just read an article that SEO marketers are freaked out for 2018 because another big algorithm shift is going to happen. Probably the estimate is February, March, and of course, Google won't announce it. It will just happen. But we have gone through 6 on ours, and every single time we've gained traffic, not lost it.
And so, ranking.
Yeah, and every one of the shows that we've managed for other clients, we have, Ken's company, Today's Growth Consultants, their sites, the ones that we're working with, the podcast, all ranked better. They didn't lose as much traffic overall as other companies did, but some of their sites did drop in traffic from an algorithm change. It happens all the time. But none of the ones that come from spoken words have ever dropped in the last 3 years. So,
in fact, many of them gained, I think, in the last
30% last time.
About 30% on sort of the ranking, especially in rankings and in some of the keyword analytics. So that's and we struggle with this, Mitch. That's why I say it's there's not a right or wrong necessarily, but it depends on your objectives. We've had some authors who really consider themselves to be prolific writers, very talented writers, cringe at our posts. And they
rewrite the whole thing.
They rewrite the whole thing. And when we analyze their site stats, their analytics, guess what? It isn't performing like others. But they have the opinion, you know what? This site, these posts say something about me, and I'm a writer, and I just can't have that on my site. Okay, that's a business decision. It's a personal.
It's a brand decision, really.
A brand decision, right?
Yeah. But I don't see any reason why, if those little errors bother you, that fixing them, those are not going to make a huge difference. That's such a small percentage of the number of words in the scope of things. I think you're fine to do that. And we're doing we actually do a quarterly audit. So we're in the midst of doing an audit of our practices and what we'd like to see added here. We just went through, and then one of the number one projects are better images and getting a broader image library, because everybody's posts are so long that when we insert images, our team's like, I need yet another image to describe internet marketing, because I've used the same 10 over and over again. So our team wants more. That's what they've come back to us and asked them. And I'll throw out this idea to them about using a Grammarly or something like that, and see if it helps.
To a point.
To a point,
also, you know that I'm on board with you. I care more about SEO than I care about whether or not the grammar is right. In fact, if the grammar was completely wrong and visits increased significantly, I'd be just as happy. So we don't
want to mess with that.
Good.
So, and that's why sometimes, just an aside, or in addition to that, sometimes in posts, when we know, and this is more for our own podcasts than with our clients, because not every client gets into doing a lot of providing us with their certain keyword phrases they want to rank on. We try to help a lot of you with that. We've had some, calls and meetings about that. But sometimes we'll intentionally have a keyword phrase in a post that is misspelled, and that's because that's a high-ranking Google keyword, even spelled, because people type things incorrectly.
Let's just say we've never done that without a client approving it ahead of time, though, because they'd flip out.
Yeah. But we do it for ourselves too. And that's why, I mean, do I care if really somebody criticizes my post because it's misspelled? I really don't, if I'm getting $25 pay per click on that keyword phrase when people come to my site and then click on an ad that's there. I really don't. So again, not necessarily right or wrong, but again, our focus is business, increasing business and improving marketing. And that's why we are doing what we're doing.
So to that end, I just want to touch back one thing quickly about after having been on Scott's show earlier last week, we realized that we maybe hadn't had the full discussion on the end of show. And this goes to how you treat your guests as well. And so I want to tie the two things together here. And that is that when you handle the end of your show, we don't allow selling on our shows. We don't recommend it. The shows that do selling, that are obvious affiliate related shows, they don't do as well in the rankings. They don't last as long in terms of lifespan. It feels a little pushy, right? So I'm sure that many of you, I've listened to your shows. They're not pushy in any way, shape, or form. But you do a lot of times allow guests a shout out for their website, or where they can find your book, or those types of things. And what we do instead is we ask the guest not to do it, that we will do it for them. We confirm it ahead of time, right at the beginning of the phone call. Is this the URL you're going to want it to go to? And did you have a special offer if there is one? And we don't allow it very often. We've occasionally allowed it when it was something really, really helpful to the majority of people. Like someone had an amazing test download file for a 3D printer, and we thought, that would be so cool. And they offered up a 50% off discount. And we were like, okay, we have to share that. So we've done it on occasion when it meant something, and don't do it all the time, which means that your audience isn't accustomed to it happening regularly. So it's a special. It feels really special. And so we drive them straight to our site for all of that. We say it's going to be on, the 3dstartpoint.com. It's going to be on feedyourbrand.co. It's going to be on our site. And there's going to be a link there. Right? Right in the blog post, there's going to be a big link there. There'll be and in this case, there's this cool 50% discount. You're going to want to go there because that was so generous of guest number, guest A. And so, wow, isn't that great? And so because we've said it that way, they only have one thing to remember. And that is your site. And you want to drive them through your site and to your guest. Yeah. You're going to make it really easy. You can make it, you can tell our team, hey, when I have an offer like that, I want it in a big bold box, outlined, whatever it is. You can make it really easy for them to scan straight down to it. Or you can even ask them to put it up towards the top. It doesn't matter. We like it at the bottom because you like them to stay on the page longer. But, but it's totally up to you. The point is that we really are doing your guest a service by tracking that through your site. because they won't know it came from you otherwise.
Right.
So you're doing them a service, you're doing yourself a service because you're driving traffic through and getting action taken, click through happening. So that bodes well if you later want to take sponsorships or you want to do click ads. You have a sense of how much people take action on things. So these are good things to test out, but always drive them to your site, and it's for their benefit. It's for their safety. They're in their car. They can't write it down. They shouldn't have to remember a long URL. It should just be a simple thing. You're always driving them back to the blog post. And we just say it like that. We just say, we don't have a formal close to our show that is like, oh, and check out the blog post. We don't say it the same way every time. We're like, that was such a cool offer from Jay Abraham. He's given us free videos. Come to the blog post and you'll have links right there to exactly to the videos, And so we just do it like that. And so that's a really simple way to do that and really keep that out. Now, if you want to do selling, though, if you want to sell something for your clients, if you've got a partnership relationship like Laughlin, Scott, Laughlin's just such a great service to people, right? And you just want to remind people to just say, hey, this is a worthwhile service. Everyone should have veil protection. And the links are going to be in this blog post again, and they're pretty much on every page on our links because we're always promoting them because they're such a useful service. That's a great way to sell for them and do it.
In the case of Laughlin, as an example, anybody who works with them has their own affiliate link to them, and you want them to go through your affiliate link anyway, and so you've got to bring them to your site to do that. Right?
Yep, I hear you.
But the one caveat, Tracy, I want to mention, and I know Scott knows this, but others that are going to watch this video and recording to know, the live show is a little tricky dynamic for not sharing with people where they can find the guest. Okay, I think in a live show, you may need to allow that guest to say what their website is. If it's on Facebook Live or something, but when we edit that into a podcast, that could be taken out. Doesn't have to be, but could be. And then, of course, in some sort of an outro sense, saying, make sure to come to weclosenotes.com to the blog post to find everything.
Right. And another way to do that is if you're working with your assistant like you are, Scott, where she's there, she can type in any URL right into the comments field. And that's another way to deal with it. So you're just saying, hey, you can go to the blog post anytime and you'll be able to get these. But in the meantime, because the show's airing and you guys can't.
You're watching live.
Yeah, you're watching it live. It's in the comments below. Go click it. And
that's
so
what we've been doing.
Do it that way. Yeah. And that way you didn't say it, so you don't have to cut it out later. But and they won't remember it anyway. It's a lot easier for them to just click it. They're not going to type it in while they're listening to you. So
we've even at the time when the guest has said it, we would literally like, listen, guys, if you're watching this, just go below, catch it in the comments. But if you're listening on iTunes, Stitcher, or any other podcast, just go to the blog. Easier for you. It's done that way. And it's a totally big tip from last week from having you guys on.
Yeah, just tying that in, it really makes it really, really simple for them to remember one thing consistently and constantly. Just makes it easy for everybody. I have a couple of other notes from the team. If you don't have anything else, Tom, on this particular subject.
No, go ahead. Okay.
So 2 things. When the guest is famous, our team doesn't always know that. So we had like an Olympian or something, and they didn't know that. They didn't know this person was famous, or like people would recognize their face. And so I was like, why are we showing a graphic with some other woman? She's an Olympian. She's famous. There's pictures of her everywhere. Why aren't we using her picture? So if that's the case, just mention that. And when you drop it in and just say, hey, please use a picture of this guest in the graphic. That's plenty.
Why it's good to actually upload a headshot if it doesn't work out the greatest, right? So you know that, it's the same person versus Scott Carson, the soccer player in Europe versus the note guy, right?
Exactly, right. So occasionally when there is, just put a link to their website where they could download any of the pictures from. Sometimes we ask for permission. So that is something that we regularly do. Say, hey, can we take any of these pictures off your website? Right. Or are there a specific set of pictures you prefer that we use? They'll send them to you if they're famous. They already have a stock set of not just a headshot, but, especially if they're like an Olympian, action shots, that you might want to include.
Let's expand this subject just slightly, Tracy. Yep. I agree with everything you just said, but think about when people are going to scroll through your blog feed and they're seeing just that featured image and the titles of all the episodes, or they're scrolling through your social media feed and they're seeing one of your posts after another. unless they're really famous. And this, another one of our hosts interviewed Kevin Harrington, one of the first sharks in Shark Tank. He's I would say nationwide in the United States at minimum, well recognized and well known. We should use his headshot.
Yeah, and do that when you edit my interview with Kevin as well.
No question. We would absolutely do that. But
we had a hard time finding some.
Yeah.
Well, but now you've interviewed him, Tracy, for some other things, and I'm sure we'll have everything we need for that. But there are other people who are, like Tracy said, famous within your industry, and they have a headshot, and they might prefer you use their headshot. But if you're going through your feed and you're seeing a whole lot of headshots of all these people, your site visitor or your social media visitor doesn't really know who they are. That's not going to entice them to click. And that's why very often with our episode graphics, we're trying to choose images that are visually relevant to the subject.
Representational.
That would entice someone to click to want to see more. And a headshot doesn't always do that. So that's why we sort of lean toward images that are more descriptive, related to the subject, that someone would want to click, and don't use a headshot unless it's specifically requested, which you need to do if you want us to use the headshot. Or obviously if it's somebody very, very well known, we would do that. Like Tracy, if you interview Damon Johns, which I know you're working on, that's another guy. I mean, I don't mean to get two guys from the same show, but I mean,
so we follow the practices that I use in my ink column. So, I'm viewing.
So you're saying I shouldn't use a picture like this?
That would work.
Well, that would get me to click once. If I've seen it again and again, I think I've seen
that would be a problem.
Well, so we had an event in October, and I wanted to spice it up the weekend before, stripping down notes. And so I went and paid $50 on Video Blocks and just got this photo.
And put your graphic in it.
It got some traffic in. We ended up selling more tickets to guys that week. But anyway.
But that works, right? Well, but that's the thing. It's like, sometimes you need something representational that just really gets them on the idea of it. And that's the way Inc. has a policy about it and the way that I do my column. And so we follow the same, we set up the same rules when we started here. And so it works the same way, is that whenever possible, we use a representational. We try not to use faces of people, because we don't want them to identify and say, I'm a brunette, that's not me. Like, we also match the gender to the guest. So in other words, if there is the back of somebody's head and she's a blonde guest, we'll use the back of a blonde's head. We want them to not think that they're separated. So we don't have that kind of reversal going on where it's weird that you have an image of a guy, but your guest is a woman. And
so what about something like this, though? Question for you. Something like this where I throw my head on top of a six-pack. Strip down. Because I use this in actually one of my Monday night webinars that we're toying with the idea of throwing it back onto you guys to reissue it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, right. Having fun and having funny graphics is always good. So impactful, funny. We use kids a lot. The kids play, the puppies play, like when I'm always referencing about, how you have to prove that your product's any good. And so I'll do dogs eating dog food, because if the dogs will eat the dog food, then your product must be good, right? So I'll use images like that again and again. We always, for whatever reason, anytime I use color, gold money, gold color, gold something always works really well. And so they are always my top articles. So I kind of try to follow the model for you guys and give you a policy about that.
Yeah, has, just so you know, it hasn't always been that way. We've been improving this over time.
Yeah.
We didn't really realize ourselves, you don't want to show a front of a face of someone who isn't the guest in all situations. And there are some situations where you can't avoid it, unless it's a crowd of people. That's okay, a big crowd of people. But we've been improving these things as we go on, and that's actually one great thing Inc. has been doing to help us.
They kind of give us guidelines, and I'm like, oh, we should adopt that. Let's try that as a policy, and it works better. And so we've been refining this over time. But anything that's sort of more representational of the topic is better. Yeah. One other thing that I just want you guys to hear again, I think we said it a couple of times. We did it in a podcast episode about headlines. I highly recommend you listen to them. But when you're doing the graphic, having your full headline on there is busy, and especially in the square. So our team kind of knows to shorten it. If you absolutely hate that, forbid it, you can, but I don't recommend it because when people are scanning, it's like a half inch. So it's pretty small. So if there's any way for them to use, like, we want a longer one because it plays with the SEO better, right? So we want a longer title on our blog post. So we typically do 2 titles. Like, it might be the first part and a colon. That's all that's on the graphic. Everything after that is in the blog post. And so that allows us to take leeway, because even if we aren't using our keyword phrase in the graphic, it doesn't matter because Google's not ranking that. They're only ranking the post title.
But the keyword phrase will be in the alt tags.
In the alt tag.
Of that image.
Yeah.
Google sees it when they research it, but visually it doesn't matter if it's in the image.
Right. So just I recommend a lot of openness about the way that the graphic titles look, and to not be such a stickler for having it be complete. Now, that being said, of course, if you've got your with so-and-so, you want your guest on there, you should absolutely put that still. But so I always try to find a shorter way, and I recommend it to when I'm reviewing everybody. I do a daily audit of what's going through, and I try to recommend something. And if I think you're going to object to it, our team will send you an email. But for the most part, I think you won't object to it. So I try to spice them up for you, have a little fun. If you guys want to do things that are fun like Scott, send them our way. I mean, we're happy to use your graphics and then make them better and, make them useful, resize them. You just send us rough ideas even. That's great. Our team will go to town on that. They love that. They sit there and they go, okay, what do I do now? So they're looking for ideas. And one of the expansion that we've got going on for next year is to get them a bigger, broader library. So
more resources for royalty-free images that are more engaging, a lot more variety, more dynamic. And basically we're just researching the best ones that we're going to be paying for to subscribe to. We pretty much run the course with all the free ones, and there's a lot more out there. We're just, we'll keep adding more as we need to.
So Nicole in my office creates an infographic that we use to upload it to Vimeo and YouTube on the episodes. I'll have her start throwing those over because there's sometimes good ones.
Hey, that'd be great.
That she's using that could be easy, just transitioned and reduplicate if we need to. So
yeah, one of the thoughts I also had was that if you guys, if you have, and a lot of people do, they have a lot of graphics and photos and images from trade shows and other things that they have, and they're just sitting there. They come off your social feed, and you're just got them in the cloud somewhere. Is to put them into a Dropbox link or something like that our team can just access at any time if they're looking for extra images to add into your posts. Because if they can be more relevant to you, that's better. And so our team will put in that link in the background information on your show, and then they can, if they're running out of ideas, they go, oh, cool, Scott has some camp pictures, and they can go use those.
Cool.
Yeah. Anything else, Tom?
Mitch no, I'm good, but I thought maybe Mitch had a question.
Another question
a few minutes ago.
A little bit about. So I'm launching a new business around. I built a software tool to keep people accountable. It's like Match.com for business people. So you could find your best accountability partner, and then my system actually tracks you, walks you through your accountability sessions every week. And what I've been doing is recording a 2-sentence commercial up front as part of the introduction. And then you guys will put it as a link at the bottom and all that. Is that bad? Is that a mistake? Should I not do that? What is your thinking about that?
So the way we found it best is to not start out with it.
Okay.
And is to so because of the way our show is structured, we have a lot more spots we can put things in. Mm-hmm. So we have a formal introduction. Tom's brother's our voiceover, and he does a great job of it, and that's great. But we try to keep that short and more about what the episode's about.
Sure.
So what the topic is and what the guest is for us. Some people don't. We do a different one every week, so we pay extra for that, right?
For that one podcast,
Yeah.
We have a different voiceover for every episode. It's very unusual.
Yeah, it's not a common thing. So that one's special. So but then transitioning into a commercial always seemed a little harsh to me because it felt like it was really long. And so what we did is we do our little intro, and then we do a commercial before we do an interview. Or we have what is this sort of like basically, hey, we're going to talk about this today. And then, but first, I'd really love to let you know about this. And so good. We can always put a transition straight onto the ad itself.
So if I were to tell you to go back now, you guys are reworking there's still another 30 episodes on my site for you to rework.
They're in process. Yeah.
That's fine. Is there any way I could drop a commercial in that? Because there's already a commercial in there from my old host, my old producer. So Can we remove his commercial and put mine in instead?
We can. We actually went back, and I think he had a lot fewer episodes. I think we did that for Mark Pattison, for example. Yeah, we can certainly go in and remove those. Another thing you could consider, and I'm not trying to be pushy salesman here, but you host on Libsyn. We have our own hosting where you can put ads into your show on demand, pushing a button at anywhere you want in your show, and take them out, replace them in the future without having to re-edit the show.
Oh, okay.
And here you can pick the spot. That's why we designed this, Tom.
Right.
Let me just interrupt you. That's why we designed our ad mixing system. That's why we have this patent pending system, is because I didn't like the idea that I had to hold fast to like 2 minutes and 30 seconds and then pause and take a break. Like I don't think like that. I don't interview like that. I don't speak like that. So this allowed us to pick the spot that's optimum. And it can be different in every single episode because you're deciding where that spot for that commercial can go. You can pick 3 spots. You can pick 2 spots. So the next logical spot for us is post-interview. So we have the interview and then we have our post-discussion right after that. So we have a transition with a little music, ad there, then we speak. People come back because they know we're going to talk, and when we talk critically about what we learned. And so it's one of the important reasons they stay listening, so they will listen through the ad. And then we treat the one at the very end as kind of like a throwaway, because if people are binge listening, they will skip as soon as they hear that end music. So they're not going to listen to an ad at the end. Usually it's a repeat if we use it at all.
Right. But the other interesting thing we do, like, I don't know if you caught it when Tracy referenced it a few minutes ago, which is that when we record an ad to be inserted with our system, any kind of transition, like, we'll get back to the answer to that question right after a word from our sponsor. That is recorded as a part of the ad. So wherever you put it in, the transition makes sense. You just have to have an appropriate pause point where you insert that ad, and it can be right after a question before the answer if you want to do it that way to make sure people come back and listen, or it can be at like Tracy said, a point where there is a transition in what you're listening to in the show that's a little more natural, transition point. So our ad system, it's working really well. Aaron Young is using it. I don't know if you've ever listened to his podcast. He advertises his own events. It's one of the products from his company, but others are using it for their own books or even paid sponsorships. And that's what we're doing. We have, for our 3D printing podcast, we have some paid sponsors. And so we can put their ads across all of our episodes for a month or 2 months and then take them out.
Yeah, so we're actually doing a special deal right now because we were invited to a juried podcast position at South by Southwest, where we'll be interviewing Jay Sammet. And so it's a really cool spot, and it's kind of competition-like. And so we're actually going to be selling sponsorship ads that's going to span 3 months. So it will be the February prior to it, the March during South by Southwest, and April post, because people will come back and listen. And so we're going to sell a 3-month sponsorship spot package that gets them across the blog posts and the podcast. And so this is the first time we've sold the bigger package. And so we're going to try that out, and we'll let you guys know how we do with it. But I mean, we've been looking at the numbers, and everyone's like, yeah, sure, because it's such a big deal to have that kind of exposure. And there will be a natural marketing lead up because we're going to market ourselves on our way into that, and there will be the boost from it, and so they'll benefit on both sides from that, and so it will be bigger than even the existing number basis that we're basing the dollar amount on.
Sure. So anyway, guys, I have a podcast guest waiting for me right now.
There you go.
All right. Well, Mitch, any follow-up questions? We'll schedule another call, whatever's convenient for you.
Fantastic. Scott, nice to meet you, and
yes, sir.
Hijacked the call today.
No, you did good, bud. You did. I have no problem. No hijacking necessary. Happy New Year to you, bud.
Good luck with your interview.
Thank you.
Bye, Mitch.
Bye-bye.
So let's see.
So just to wrap it up, so guest practices, we want to have some really good ones because we want to help you build your relationships with them. We want to also, of course, build good follow-up between both sides there. So if there's anything that our team can help you do, whether it's get those follow-up emails going, understand what they're like. One of the ones that I did want to mention is that we have a follow-up email that automatically goes up after you're a guest on the show. It goes up within an hour of them being interviewed.
Okay.
And it's a stock email. And I do the same thing after I interview someone for Inc. It's actually the same email. And it just thanks them and saying, hey, if you didn't already like us on Facebook or friend us on LinkedIn or, and it clicks to all the links, you can do that. Make sure to do that now. And if you didn't put all of your bio and all the information in that first email, if you didn't send us all of that, or if you need to correct any, now is the time. And I can't tell you how many times I get a personal email back, like as if I sent it personally to them, thanking me for the interview and saying, I've done everything you asked me to do and I can't wait to, read it or hear about it or whatever that is. They appreciate it. And so that is creating a dialogue back and forth and makes you look professional as well.
Cool. Perfect.
Anything else we can help you with today, Scott? Any questions?
No, it's been a busy week here with the end of the year. And then with us heading out here in a week, for the most part, I'm just trying to, if we can, on Tuesday, we can get an update and kind of where the episodes are going to hit. Then I can pre-write emails to go out Monday through Friday while I'm on the cruise ship, just promoting those episodes. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, or we can set those into our buffer to set up with the social media sharing on automatically stuff. Have you been, one thing I wanted to run by you here real fast, and then I got to go too, is have you seen any success with people taking your infographics and then the first paragraph and just go ahead and throw that on Google Plus as well with links to the podcast?
Yeah, some people have great luck on Google Plus. We stopped bothering with it because the rankings and information from Today's Growth, from Ken Courtwright's company, was that it just wasn't worth it. But there are some people that do really well there because their niche does really well there. Mm-hmm. And so, but we just didn't have the patience for it. So we were doing it for a while because it was easy just to duplicate it in Buffer, because that's what we use as well. But this past year I stopped it and I didn't see any ranking difference or any drop in traffic. And I just, I cut out three things. I cut out Twitter, I cut out Google Plus, and I cut out official use of YouTube. Like, we drop stuff in YouTube, but I don't push it out and try to deal with the YouTube system itself. We use it just
use it more
inside.
So the SEO aspect of things, right?
Exactly. That's all we do is we drop it in there, but I don't even try to push it out or deal with YouTube. So we just stopped doing those things over the last year, and nothing's changed. We've still been growing, and we use it enough to get the SEO value, but that's it.
Cool. I got my staff going to go through and actually add up how many views on the Facebook Lives over since we started with episode number 1 here on that, and throw that in, because your guys' episode, I just looked at it while we're going through, is over 700 views.
Wow.
Yeah. So
good.
We had 1,100 on the episode on Tuesday, 700 on the episode on Wednesday. We did some double ups on a couple days, but just kind of keep track of that for the most part. I know it takes away us having downloads on iTunes, I think, because we get a big chunk of it stuff there. But it's
in the aggregate altogether, I think that's up. What you need to look at, and different people are gonna
consume different
ways once they have latched onto your show. I want to make sure I'm keeping up with what Scott's talking about, whether that's live when they can or on their own time later on iTunes. It's all good.
Yeah, I do have an email specifically for the podcast, and I probably get three opt-ins a day. People respond, "Hey, I listened." We're up to 52 reviews on iTunes right now. We're trying to get like to get more, but we're at 46. So
it's hard to do. People really have to be proactive to go and do it. And we know people who have tried to incentivize people to go and do it, even with monetary discounts from one thing or another. And still, it's very hard to get 100 reviews on iTunes. Very hard.
Well, with the pop sockets that we did, I've actually gotten like 9 people that have done it because they wanted a pop socket. So
very cool.
I love that. I love that. That's so good. Well, best of luck. Enjoy your cruise, and we'll get our team to. I think we'll check
follow
with
up on the second.
Yeah, we'll check them.
Enjoy your weekend. Happy New Year's, guys. Be safe.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.